Hello, everyone. I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you the next entry in our EHR telehealth series, where we're talking to the EHR vendors and what is their approach to how they're doing telemedicine with their customers, how they're working with third-party partners, etc. So today we're excited to bring Modernizing Medicine. We have two experts with us. First, we have Patric Edmondson. He's Chief Technology Officer at Modernizing Medicine, and we also have Dr. Andrew Rosenthal, Medical Director of Plastic Surgery at Modernizing Medicine. Welcome, Patric and Dr. Rosenthal.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for giving us
Thank you so
time
much
to
for having us.
tell the story.
Yeah, so before we dive into the Modernizing Medicine's approach to telehealth, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself and Modernizing Medicine? Patric, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Patric Edmondson. I've been with Modernizing Medicine now for a little over 6 years. And when I joined the company, we had about 2 products at the time. This is back in 2014, and we have obviously built out our product line over that period of time to include today's topic, which is going to be oriented around telehealth.
Yeah, it's amazing how far you come. I remember I gave a keynote at a user conference and I asked Dan Kane, your CEO, when are you going to get a PM? He said, it's on the roadmap, John, be patient. You've come a long way. Dr. Rosenthal?
Thank you. So I'm Dr. Drew Rosenthal. I'm a practicing plastic surgeon, and I've also been the medical director for plastic surgery at Modernizing Medicine probably for about 6 years as well now. Came on about the same time as Patric did. And I helped to direct some of the things about the software from a perspective of a physician. That's one of the things that's unusual about Modernizing Medicine is we have docs in each of our specialties, dermatology, plastic surgery, ENT, ophthalmology, orthopedics, that can know what a physician is looking for. And then we also actually code the software as far as the medical content. So all the medical content is written by a doctor. So this sort of started with Dr. Michael Sherling, who's our one of our co-founders, and they found it was easier to teach a doctor to code than it was to teach dermatology to a coder, so to an engineer. So that's what we do now.
Yeah, and it made sense, even since the beginning days, the way Modernizing Medicine designed the EHR, you needed doctors involved or it just wouldn't have been successful. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. So let's dive into telehealth. Patric, maybe you can start us off and then Drew can kind of give us the physician perspective. But what was Modernizing Medicine's view of telehealth pre-COVID-19, and then how did it, COVID-19 change that approach?
Yeah, so like many of the things that we do here, I mean, our philosophy that drives us to build the capabilities we build is really powered by making sure we can bring quality back between the physician and the patient encounter. So almost everything we do is really threaded back into that fabric. Telehealth for us is not new. COVID-19 did not prompt a pivot onto telehealth for Modernizing Medicine. In fact, we had started building our telehealth platform in 2016 and resurfaced it as a solution in 2017 and have had and persisted that capability for the past roughly 4 years. What COVID produced for us was sort of re-energizing our focus on some roadmap capabilities that we had always wanted to get to. But because of lack of adoption over that period of time, a lot of things just never lined up. Although the tech we built, I think, was really good stuff. It was still built in current generation principles and technologies, but underwriters weren't going to pay for virtual visits. There's no sort of nationalized policy for telemedicine or telehealth. States had their own laws, and so there's just no scale, unfortunately, that all of that provided friction in terms of adoption. COVID changed that. And so when we saw that COVID was going to introduce that kind of a change, we wanted to take advantage of the handful of things that we'd been contemplating for some time to get in place. And really to boil it down, I could probably boil it down into 2 areas of main focus. while we already had a fully functioning telehealth platform, what we wanted to extend into that platform was secure synchronous video. So that was one of the first things that we pivoted our resources onto, and we did that very, very rapidly. Second, we wanted to pay particular attention to patient safety capabilities, anything that would make it easier for a patient to be able to participate in virtual medicine, to find their doctor, to recognize the fact that they had a visit, to know how to initiate that televisit with the physician, how to log in to their patient portal, which is all this DNA is really converged back to the patient portal through our telehealth platform. And so primarily our focus has been over the past few months now, a couple of 3 months, anything that is patient facing that eases the journey for the patient to be able to connect with their physician and participate in their healthcare.
I love the description of access to telehealth being a patient safety issue. That's really interesting. Anything you'd add, Drew, from the physician perspective? I mean, it's obvious doctors didn't adopt it, and then COVID-19 changed the value equation where they had to adopt it or not see patients.
Absolutely. It was sort of a solution, almost looking for a problem. But once we started using it, we saw all these problems that it could solve, right? And how much easier access to care was for patients. Plastic surgeons have sort of long used this to see virtual consults through Skype and things that weren't, certified solutions and weren't necessarily HIPAA compliant. And so there were lots of use cases sort of around the fringe for these types of things. And once people started getting more comfortable using the telehealth solutions, that means both providers and patients, they realized how great this was and all the places that you could use this. And we started looking back at the workflow and the patient flow and all the things that we were so ingrained into medicine of we did this because that's the way we always did it. And it gave us an opportunity to sort of look at things differently and figure out how we could use a solution and different workflows throughout medical care. And that's actually been a gift in a way.
Yeah. So it's interesting that Modernizing Medicine decided to build your own video telehealth solution. There's a lot of partners out there that you could have worked with. Certainly there's plenty of telehealth vendors. I think we have a list of like 200 or something on our site at Healthcare IT Today. But, why did you choose to kind of develop your own? What was the thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And in fact, we developed 2 different ones for 2 different product lines. And in one case, we fully adopted something that was off the shelf that had a pretty decent software development toolkit, things that were exposed that we could take advantage of. That allowed us to move rapidly on one front. With regard to our other product line, we have for so many years built a core competency in building native applications. We just have the skill set and the experience to know what frameworks work where. And so we basically relied on that sort of collective experience and decided, we've already, if the mile was the journey, we had already built in our telehealth platform, 90%, 95% of that mile. So we certainly were going to go ahead and continue our natural motion. We didn't build everything from scratch. I mean, as you know, there are third-party controls and libraries and components you can pull off the shelf and embed in your products. So for us, it was already knowing which ones would work for us and being able to act quickly. But our entire ecosystem really has been built here at the company, with the exception of third-party services and other third-party systems that we integrate to. So it's very natural for us to just add secure synchronous video and some of these other workflow capabilities to an already pre-existing platform.
And just so I can be specific, and luckily I know your product line pretty well, but I assume it was gMed that you did the integration with, and then it's Modernizing Medicine that you built it in fully in-house the same way you developed the rest of the product. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, and that makes sense. You know, I have a long history with gMed even before Modernizing Medicine bought them. So
Okay.
it's you know, it's interesting to hear how the approach. And so I think it will be, you know, it's great that you offered it to both because I think they both need it, right? So that's awesome that you did that. But you know, as we dive into the features, I think it will be interesting to hear you talk about, you know, is this the Modernizing Medicine or is it kind of the gMed integration and where, you know, each of the features falls for those. But how deeply integrated is it in both of those cases into the various EHR solutions and what's available now, or you know what is still maybe on the roadmap?
Yeah, so with regard to EMA and ModMed PM, it's very deeply integrated. There is, you know, the workflows are tied together. They're very natural. You know, the patient when they interact on their patient portal, updating their own medical information, signing consent forms, all of that is really deeply embedded with our backend systems where the visits actually occur. And a lot of that is a function of the maturity of the mobile first approach we've taken. And we have a lot of mobile capabilities that we've deployed out to the iPad, you know, Droid phones, iPhones. So we're just extending really from EMA and ModMed PM all the way out to the edge. Now, gMed is sort of a different place in terms of its overall evolution and its tech stack, in fact. And so a mobile first strategy was not adopted early. And the technologies that are in play aren't sort of readily, you know, make it easy for us to replicate what we've done within EMA and ModMed PM. But we still have enough of the connective tissue to provide this experience to our patients by integrating into a third-party solution that gives us many of the capabilities that we needed to provide some semblance of parity between these two products.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially from the mobile aspect. You know, I still go back to the first time I saw Modernizing Medicine demoed on an iPad, which the iPad had just come out too, and you know, probably my top 10 demos I've ever seen. So it really is. It makes sense that's in the DNA of your culture. So, how about for you, Drew? You know, how important is the EHR integration from a physician perspective?
I mean, it's great. The what we did was, in order to build something that was a suite and everything was native and sort of flows from one to the other, so you can't tell where the seams are. You know, and that's something I think we do really well, as opposed to just sort of creating these bolt-ons that are, you know, just have a little bit of a thin line between, you know, the main product and whatever you're attaching to it. So from a user perspective and from a patient perspective, having that be seamless and you know, not have to jump from one thing to the other, that should just be the patient experience. And we spend a lot of time of making sure what that you know, what that UX and that UI looks like for the physician and for the patient.
Great. So let's dive into those features. We call this our lightning round. With each EHR vendor, we go through and ask for just a quick answer of each. You know, how are you approaching each of these features? Which I think we'll touch on some of the things we were just talking about. Like, I can't wait to hear, you know, the patient portal integration, et cetera. So let's start off. We'll go down each of them. First up is the obvious one. Is your solution HIPAA compliant?
Yes.
Better be. How about custom branding? How are you handling the custom branding on the telehealth experience?
Yeah, there's a capability of allowing the providers to brand the you know, the patient-facing portal piece. So the patient portal piece of that capability exists.
And can you also custom brand like the notifications and things so that it's coming from the doctor, or at least from the clinic?
That's a good question. So the patient reminders, patient self-scheduling is all handled through a separate integration, but it all flows very natural. It looks native in our UI and our UX. So there's no branding that I don't believe is available for the provider, but it certainly looks like it's a ModMed product.
Gotcha. All right, and I jumped ahead to that one, but we'll keep moving along. How about telehealth appointment scheduling? I assume it's all integrated with your PM.
It is, yes.
All right. And patient self-scheduling, do you provide that option?
We have patient self-scheduling, yes.
How do you feel about that, doctor? You like self-scheduling?
It's great. I mean, at the end of the day, patients would just want to, we now live in a society. We want us to be able to click and choose. We're so visual now. So not having to call and talk to somebody and get passed around is great. I love it as a patient and as a doctor.
I mean, you'd think a doctor would love it, but there's some that want to control that schedule so much. So I think it's finding the right balance, right?
But there are ways to build that so that you maintain some control over it. And that's what we do so that it's not just a free for all.
Yep. It does feel like the future, though, especially as doctors were getting inundated with calls about COVID, having the self-scheduling is so much more convenient for a patient. So that's awesome.
And that allows you to repurpose staff to do things that is much more productive than simply scheduling appointments.
Awesome. Yep, I agree. How about asynchronous text messaging with the patient?
Yes, it is, and we had that in place a long time ago when we initially built the telehealth platform.
Yeah, I was going to say, and some people consider that telehealth itself, but that's a broader definition question, right? But it is so powerful, so it's a good to have. And how about a slightly similar, but I define it a little different, which is real-time text chat during the visit. So asynchronous might be before reminders or communications, whereas this is like real-time text chat. So if I want to give you a patient education link, or if I want you to upload an image or something, do you offer those type of features?
Yes, we do. We developed it at the same time. We developed the synchronous secure video, and that chat is similarly secure as well.
Awesome. Any of us that have been doing Zoom understand the value of that feature.
Yeah. And one other comment, we know that with the pivot to COVID, CMS relaxed so many of the sort of the HIPAA rules that we are all accustomed to, allowing virtual visits to take place over the telephone. I mean, any modality was fair game. We still moved the way that we ordinarily would, in that we expect our products to be HIPAA compliant and secure. So we did not cut any corners there.
Yeah. Well, and I think it made sense that OCR offered the enforcement discretion, but I also think it's going to make sense when they roll it back, because you don't have to use a non-HIPAA compliant solution to accomplish what you need to. There's plenty of options out there. So yeah, I think that's a smart approach, because my prediction is it rolls back. So
obviously, eventually the pendulum will swing back, and you'll find yourself having to be compliant. So it's just the way we build our products.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, now is the time to get on the compliant solution. It was fine as a temporizing measure, but it's not a long-term game plan.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if you're overrun with COVID and you need to connect a patient with their husband over FaceTime, because he's dying or she's dying, like that makes sense, but not for going forward. Yeah, I agree. How about web-based or app-based? And I think there's kind of two perspectives on this, from both the clinician perspective and the patient perspective. How are you doing web versus app?
We do both. We do both, and for both actors, physician or patient. The patient has a patient portal they can access through a browser, or they can use Pocket Patient, which is the native mobile app that's deployed out to your mobile device. Same is true for the doctors. I mean, as you alluded to earlier in the interview, that our physicians can choose to use EMA or ModMed PM through the web browser or through the app.
Yeah. Interestingly, I think when it comes to telehealth, they often want the desktop so they can multitask, have multiple windows, multiple screens. So I've actually seen a huge push to say, you better give me a desktop. I don't want the mobile, which is different than if I'm in the room.
And the other, from a patient perspective, everybody carries these with them. So for the patient just to be able to use their phone was great. And the other thing it gave us was the ability to use that light on the camera, and that camera quality that's so much better than the camera on the computer. And that was a really, really important for us, especially for our dermatology clients who, needed really good resolution in order to be able to see skin lesions and things like that. And so being able to do what Patric and the rest of the team did was just amazing to get that quality.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard about the light capability. That's impressive. I had heard people of saying take the picture with the HD camera, send it across because that's higher quality than the video. So I had heard that kind of hack, if you will, of how do you solve the quality issue. But the light, that adds a lot in a lot of cases.
Yeah. And we had to very rapidly work through some workflows by specialty.
Yeah.
We literally were holding phones up, simulating a patient who had to open their mouth and be able to visualize things to the back of the throat and make sure you had control of the flash. I mean, just simple things like that that you would think are native and exposed to be able to use quickly are not. You have to write code to get to them so that you can control that functionality. And those are just sort of some of the typical hurdles that we ran into with building out some of this capability.
No, those are the interesting nuances, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't your tech person who suggested that needed to happen. It was probably the doctor that said, "Hey, I can't diagnose that."
Fortunately, at ModMed, they're sort of one and the same, at least in certain roles, and that's where we have that benefit. I think it came from Dr. Sherling.
Oh yeah, no, it makes sense that he understands the quality needs to be there. Cool.
Yep.
So how about audit logs?
Yeah, I mean, we have, as you would imagine, we have audit logging framework that's in the back end of the product, and so it captures all eventing that the system produces.
Seems like that's one of the advantages of an EHR vendor who's used to doing the audit logs per HIPAA, per all the other requirements.
Yeah.
I think they built it into the telehealth just naturally, whereas some other telehealth vendors haven't. And I don't know, I think that could come back to bite some of the third-party ones if they haven't done it right.
And again, that's the advantage of our ecosystem being tightly integrated, because we're basically leveraging central services, and audit logging for us is a central service, and all activity gets referenced back to those types of central services.
Yep, absolutely. How about automated patient reminders?
Yes, and again, this is handled through the relationship we have with one of our partners that we had already had in place just for non-COVID type workflows. We were able to take advantage of that capability.
Now they're able to integrate, the unique links to join and that information as far as whether it's a telehealth visit versus a regular visit. Because I assume your telehealth visits, you have to send join us here, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yes.
All right. How about patient intake paperwork electronically? So, the forms that people need to fill out.
This is in progress. We have some of this already, but this goes back to our earlier comments around our focus being on the patient, some of the patient-facing aspects. We have this concept of 24 hours before the virtual visit, and then in the parking lot before the virtual visit. And so we have different patient intake scenarios for each of those sort of steps in the life cycle. And some of them we have in place, and some of them we are actively building. Some will come out in our latest release, which is being deployed as we speak over the next couple of weeks, and some of it will come out in the subsequent release over the next 10 or 11 weeks or so. But this is a work in progress, but it is.
And this was one of those items that once we saw we were doing this with telehealth, we realized the value of this in everyday normal in-person visits as well. To be able to finish that paperwork ahead of time, to have that done through the patient portal and on their phones through Pocket Patient. There's no reason somebody should sit in a waiting room and do their paperwork.
Especially now when they don't want to sit in the waiting room, or maybe legally aren't allowed to sit in the waiting room anymore. So, yep, makes total sense. How about the virtual waiting room? How are you approaching? Really, this is a broader question around what's the workflow, and how much workflow have you built in? Can the MAs go into the virtual waiting room and then see, or the nurse before the doctor? How are you approaching kind of that waiting room workflow?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the functionality, and Drew, it'd be great if you could talk about what you see in the real world. But again, a lot of what we are building is an extension from our pre-existing telehealth platform. So the patient being able to update their patient history, your allergies, prescriptions, a lot of that has long existed in our solutions. Now we're extending that out to handle more information, consents, being able to upload documents and send them in. Those are some of the things that we're currently focusing on. Patient will have access to their clipboard so they can provide updates in advance. And the patient will in fact be prompted through this life cycle, the sort of the 24-hour before the visit, there'll be notifications that will go out to the patient, reminding them to go onto their patient portal and provide some of these updates, to sign some of the consents, to if there's documentation that they want to upload through the patient portal, they can do so through intramail to get that content back to the physician. And so that this is all happening again in a tightly integrated system. So as this information is being updated via the patient portal, it's just being updated in our backend system and in the database. So anyone who pulls up that patient record can see those updates as they are occurring or after they occur.
Can I dive in? So if the patient, when the patient goes for their telehealth visit, do they have to log into their patient portal, or are you giving them a direct link? How did you work out that flow?
Yeah, we learned early that a lot of patients had forgotten their credentials for getting into their portal, and this is how we were deploying the tech. So we basically reworked all of that so that the patient can use a couple of things that are very familiar to them, and we're able to tokenize that information and provide secure access and credentialing into our system that way. It's even with the ability for a patient to reset their password as an example. Some people can do that and they're very comfortable with it, and some they just get lost very early in the patient journey. So yeah, we had to make those aspects of the workflow very, very simple, but we had to keep them secure.
So you changed it to more of a tokenized rather than a username password.
We did. I mean, we do a couple of questions that anyone, you would easily be able to answer for yourself, right. And then we would tokenize that, and of course compare it with other information we have to set the credentialing up. Yes.
And it was great to watch how nimble everybody was, doing this, and really spoke to sort of the culture of modernizing medicine that we saw. Everybody wanted to use this tech. We had a lot of good adoption pretty quickly, but that there were some barriers, and some of it was this, sign on with a credential, and it was, costing physicians time and patients time. And the team very quickly were able to sort of turn that on its side and tokenize this information and get it into a much easier sign-on that was still secure. And that was just amazing to watch everybody come together to do that, for the patient and the doctors, which is why we do this.
Yeah, the patient's frustrated, the doctor's frustrated because now they don't have an appointment. Yeah, it's amazing the depths we've seen people go to. I've known some companies have hired these call center services to call ahead of time to make sure the tech works, to ensure that doesn't happen, which, that seems a bit extreme, but, that is sometimes the reality depending on your patient population and their tech skills. So that's great that you worked on it. How about multilingual and remote interpretation, which I guess they're kind of two things, right? The multilingual versus adding in a remote interpreter.
Yeah, so for sure it's a no on multilingual, and I'm going to assume it's a no on remote interpretation, because I honestly don't know the definition of that.
Well, and I think along those lines, can you allow team-based sessions? How many people can join, and is it just one-to-one, or can you add multiple people?
So currently it's two actors can participate in the secure synchronous video, but we've just done a proof of concept for multi-actor virtual visit, just to again test drive that tech and make sure that we were on the right track. And so proof of concept has proven out well, and so now we're going to move full speed ahead to build out that capability, but we don't have it yet. But we definitely do have one-to-one capability in place.
Right, and that's what most of them do for remote interpretation is once you can do multiple, you can just add an interpreter as the third element. Although it's been interesting hearing a bunch of them saying we need the third one, maybe to do incorporate a caregiver or on the patient side, which was a little bit of a surprise to me when I heard that. I was like, oh yeah, makes sense, but I hadn't really thought of it. Could be multiple providers, could be a patient and their caregiver, or it could be a remote interpreter, which becomes more and more valuable the more we do this. So how about integrated clinical documentation?
Yes, I mean, just by the very nature that this ecosystem is tightly integrated, yes, that's in place.
You haven't integrated ambient clinical voice to auto document yet, right?
Well,
I had to push it.
well, we do use nuance for voice to text, and we've been looking very carefully at some of the latest or emerging technologies around natural language, but it's not quite there yet. And as our products really rely on highly structured data, so we have to make sure that anything that's captured over voice is parsed out properly because it's going to become discrete data as far as we're concerned, and it needs to find its place in the right places in our data model. So not quite there yet, but that is definitely on our radar screen. We think it's a couple of years away before it's really safe and a physician can just talk and we can actually parse out what's being said and deploy that into the application.
And there's another, to go back for a second to the sort of team-based solutions and multiple care providers and that type of thing. One of the things that's actually been very useful as well that you don't think about for telehealth is sort of going in the opposite direction. So for instance, as a surgeon, I may be at a hospital operating and a patient has to come into the office that I need to see. Well, my staff can use the telehealth solution for me to see what's going on from the hospital in my own office. We all have very talented staff, and we can say, well, do this or that, as opposed to what normally would occur, like, Mrs. So-and-so is here, and this is what I see, and what should I do? Well, can you show me? Now we can. So we can actually use telehealth in the office to go to the doctor who is not on site, as opposed to the reverse. The patient's there and the doctor's not.
Interesting. No, I think, yeah, it opens up all sorts of opportunities. That's a great example. Cool. How about a screen image capture? So, we already talked about holding up your wound or whatnot. Can you capture the image and insert it into the EHR?
Doc?
So yeah, we have a couple different ways to do that. First of all, we can just take screenshots from within the video, which works in most circumstances, and then we can use the attachments in EMA to upload those into the patient note folio, so that you have those possibilities. Also, patients can send in photos via the patient portal. And can use Intramail within our solution to send static images that way if they need to sort of supplement what we're seeing in the video.
Sure. Cool. How about screen share? Can you share? I think it's most used for like patient education or things like that.
We do not have that. It's on our roadmap, but it's wasn't not a priority for us in this round.
Sure. No one asked for it until now. Now that we've all done it with Google Meet and WebEx, et cetera, we want it. So.
We definitely have looked at it previously. I mean, we've actually implemented it once, and it didn't work very well. And that was a solution that was fully off the shelf, and it just wasn't ready. And it came from a really reputable tech-savvy company that anyone would recognize if I said their name. But it didn't work out for us. I'm not sure if we were just gun shy as a result of that, because we put a lot of work into it, and we just never really came back to it. But I did check with our product manager prior to this session and to see where we stood now with regard to screen sharing.
Yeah, it's back on the roadmap. That's interesting. How about other patient education? I imagine you already have some integrated. It's an extension of that.
It was all a part of what we had to do. It wasn't just us building tech. It wasn't just us coding in all of the ICD-10 code and mapping to SNOMED and making sure all the billing. It was a full company readiness effort, which meant that in client services and in knowledge services in particular, all the educational materials had to be produced. All the videos for how to use the capabilities had to be produced. I mean, it was a full team effort across this company, from marketing to client services to product development, product management, to make sure that we got the best solution in the hands of our customers and our patients.
How about post-visit? And this is kind of 2 or 3 features, and sometimes they're packaged together, sometimes not.
Yeah.
But like patient ratings, patient reviews, surveys. Could be internal, could be external to the ZocDocs and health grades of the world. How are you approaching that?
It's in-app. It's visit based, so we can collect that information from the patient within very close proximity of their experience.
So you had it built in already, and it's just an extension of the existing stuff.
Yeah, we have in-app survey capabilities that were already in the product.
Great. And let's see, patient payment. Can you handle that?
Yes, we can, and separately, we have built our own PayFac capability here at Modernizing Medicine over the past year. So we have our own platform for allowing our providers and patients remitting payments electronically through our own ecosystem.
Yeah, it's become so important.
Yeah.
Yeah, having that PayFac as a provider, having that ability and all the bells and whistles that we can do to create integrations from the practice management system to the patient portal and all of that, to be able to see those payments all the way through is just fantastic.
Yep. So how about the insurance billing side of things? Did you create anything specific for telehealth? I imagine it uses your existing billing. Did you have to add on other stuff?
Yeah, we had to make sure that the proper codes were referenced inside of our product, and that's one of the things that one of our engineers, one of our developers, like Dr. Rosenthal, get involved in these things to make sure that we have the right coding in the system, so that when billing and claims are produced, that works well. In fact, we discovered that some of our physicians had a difficult time. We had questions about how to code. We had moved so quickly in creating these new codes that they were holding on to submitting claims until they were sure that they had coded things properly. So there had to separately be an entire set of webinars that were sort of doctor to doctor webinars to explain how you would now run your business in this new environment, all the way down to recognizing these new codes that are important for billing, and so the doctors basically carried that water as well, sitting in many webinars, whether they were this is really important, whether they were our customers or not. The conversations were less about modernizing medicine's ecosystem and more about how to keep your business open. And so, of course, we touched on topics like the new coding that we had to build into the product.
Yeah,
we had all of our doctors, compliance, and billing specialists just poring over the interim final rulings from CMS as this got released. Sometimes, re-released hours later. Just trying to make sure we completely understood this and to not only code it into the software to make as much automated as we could, but also to just educate, both our customers and invited anybody else who wanted to listen to try and help everybody understand this in real time.
Yeah, I've heard a few of them, and it's much more complex than we realize, especially when they do things like site. Telehealth just blew up the whole site idea. And what is considered site? What if you're in the office? What if you're at home? What if the patient's in the office and at home? And it gets complex really quickly. So it makes a lot of sense that you do that type of.
We were literally asking if we said, okay, you had to put the site in a certain place when you were submitting this, and we said, well, what if the doctor's in Starbucks? Do you have to have Starbucks registered with CMS as a delivery care site? And the answer for a while was yes. At least for a few days there. So it got very interesting.
Yeah, the other question is that a HIPAA compliance issue? But We'll save that for
They closed Starbucks, and then it wasn't a problem.
That's true. That's true. Well, the Starbucks is empty anyway.
Right.
You're all alone in the Starbucks doing it. Cool. So that's a great overview of your product. I want to shift gears just to wrap this up and talk about how would you approach it with, like, say, an EHR customer that already has a telehealth solution, or maybe just chose to go with a third-party vendor because they needed some extra capabilities that you didn't have. Will you collaborate with them, and what's your approach to third-party telehealth vendors?
Well, we certainly would not stand in a physician's way who decided that they wanted to use some other solution for conducting a virtual visit. And if we felt like we had to advocate for that physician, I'm sure that we would. We would, I think, additionally want to spend time with our doctors, showing them what our telehealth capabilities can do, what that platform can do, and it comes to no cost to our physicians. It's just there, and it's likely that that's where we would put our energy, because there's just so much more you can get out of using our telehealth platform, because it is part of our entire product ecosystem.
Sure. And there are compelling reasons there. Would you? What kind of integrations do you have available for a third-party platform that may want to integrate and sees that as an opportunity for them? Do you have the APIs and stuff available for them to integrate, or even export CSV files? I've seen all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
How do you look at integrations with third parties like that?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a kind of a long answer, because it's sort of a little bit of it's baked in history, but one of the core competencies of Modernizing Medicine was building a really strong integration capability, because as you know, Modernizing Medicine started with building a clinical solution, not a practice management solution. Therefore, we had to know how to splice EMA into any number of practice management solutions and or labs. And that has evolved from day one. Today, we have a pretty rich integration capability that includes everything in the toolbox, from FHIR to HL7 to store and forward to dropping things off in secure FTP sites to exposing. We'll use your APIs for point-to-point integration. So we can do integrations in any fashion, but we really are focusing more on our FHIR-based implementation. We're implementing that strictly based on the FHIR specification, and we have been building out a marketplace that allows third parties who want to take advantage of some of our capabilities through FHIR. We're making that available to them. So are all of the various endpoints exposed today through FHIR here in Modernizing Medicine? No, but we've been working and building out those capabilities for the past year and a half, and we still have some way to go. But we are already doing quite a bit of handshaking with third parties through our FHIR implementation.
Yeah, my favorite Modernizing Medicine integration story was I was told that they were using the EMA front end for documentation. I think it was a dermatology. It just makes sense because you have the touch screen, all that. And they dumped all that granular data, right? Which as you kind of alluded to, all the granular data into a Cerner system. So they'd give them the granular data and they'd give them a PDF of the note, and Cerner would take it, all that granular data, and display the PDF. They just display the PDF, but it's like
just flatten everything.
Yeah, and maybe they've come a ways. That was 6-7 years ago, but it's the reality of integration and some of the challenges we face. But it makes sense because you did come from that perspective of clinical and having to integrate with the PM for so many years. So that makes a lot of sense. Are there places you're relying on partners in your telehealth and maybe telehealth supporting services? We already talked about reminders is through a partner. Are there other areas you're looking at partners or using partners?
Yeah, correct. And as I had mentioned earlier with regard to the gMed product line, we use a partner, third party. We tend to not sort of name these partners, so I apologize for not doing so. But in that scenario, we are working with a partner that had a great piece of technology for us to use and allowed us to deploy very quickly. With regard to ModMed, or rather EMA and ModMed PM, we we have a lot of our infrastructure deployed. We have all of our infrastructure deployed at AWS, and we use so many of the capabilities and tools that AWS affords. And so we have been taking advantage of the AWS ecosystem with regard to our telehealth capabilities on the EMA ModMed PM side.
Cool. And just the one last question to kind of wrap it up. Where do you see telehealth kind of as, is it an important part of the growth of the business at Modernizing Medicine, or how do you see telehealth's place in your business going forward?
Yeah, I'll provide a quick response, but I really want to turn it over to Dr. Rosenthal, who can speak more directly to it. Everything we do, and I want to make sure this doesn't sound like mother and apple pie, but really everything we do is to make it so a patient can participate in their healthcare and reach their physician and vice versa. It's very important to us from that perspective. If it were important to us from strictly a revenue perspective, we would have given up on telehealth 4 years ago when we decided to build it. We built it for a reason, and that is to find modalities where, a patient who can't come into the office, never mind COVID, who can't come into the office can find a way to see their physician. That's why we've done it. It's very important, I think, to our company for that reason. But Doc, you want to provide your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it really is, and I don't think you're over, mom and apple pieing it. And it's the reason this company was started, and it's the reason it exists was to, we build this stuff because it's the right thing to do for doctors and for providers and for patients and for practices. And if you do the right thing, it'll eventually, you're playing to where the puck is going to be, not to where it is. And we knew that telehealth was an important part of care going forward, for access to care, and that's really what we're trying to provide. So we, like I said, this was initially a solution looking for a problem. We knew the problems were out there. We knew the things it could solve. And then once providers and patients got comfortable using it, we saw all these places it could be used and that it is being used. And that's, it came through a terrible, in a terrible way, that in such a sudden way through this pandemic. But I'm very thankful that we had the tools there, and thankful to be working with such a great team that had the foresight to go, we're going to need this, we're going to use this, we're going to build it.
Now, I think that's a great way to wrap this up. Ever since I first met Dan Kane, who's the co-founder of Modernizing Medicine, and his vision was to modernize medicine. He definitely wasn't trying to cash in on the meaningful use money. He wasn't trying to just build another EHR as part of a business. He really does, and I think did want to modernize medicine. I feel awful that he got mired in the EHR certification, meaningful use burden that I think every EHR vendor had to face, but because I think Modernizing Medicine has done some amazing things on the clinical end, but I think this is another example of investing in the telehealth side of things as well to really modernize medicine the way it needs to. So thanks so much for spending time, Patric and Dr. Rosenthal. I appreciate you sharing the insights, and thanks everyone for watching. If you want to check out more videos like this in our EHR telehealth series, you can check them out at healthcareittoday.com.